Good evening and welcome to the Monday night edition of the People Show with your host and facilitator, Mark Wallace. I am always excited to be with you. We are here live on intellectualradio.com, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. For the next hour on Instagram, of course, we're only on Instagram for 1 hour. And of course, we're here at intellectualradio.com until 9 o'clock, as well as we are on Facebook and YouTube. You can go to YouTube, look for Mark Wallace, The People's Show, and you can subscribe there or register there. There is no cost to being on the program. We don't charge a subscription cost, but we are glad to have you. We've got a great program coming up for you tonight. We're going to be talking with the candidate running for mayor of the Village of Flossmoor by the name of Joni Bradley-Scott. So she's going to be with us a little bit later on in the program. And then we're also going to be talking with Dr. Kelly Fishman, who specializes in helping animals recover from traumatic injuries and surgeries. She excels in canine sports and competitions and maintains optimal mobility. She's going to be talking with us on how you can extend the comfort level of your four-legged, furry members of your family. I had to put my beautiful German Shepherd down in October the 21st, because his hips were gone and he was just suffering. It's one of those very difficult things that you have to do. So we're going to be talking with her. So for all of you who are animal lovers like me, we're going to be talking to Dr. Kelly Fishman at the bottom of the hour. Now, of course, we have so much going on. I just watched the last readout on MSNBC with Joy Reid, whose program has been canceled. Now, I know that there are people who are looking at this from a purely racist or racial biased, but in media, in mainstream media in particular, these kinds of things happen. They do happen. Now, do I believe that Joy Reid was targeted? Probably targeted by Muskie and the Donald Dump and the Jason Vogt, the Three Stooges. Probably. I don't have any evidence of that, but there's probably some influence there, whether it was direct or indirect, maybe. However, these types of things do happen. I wish that we had more Joy Reids who is willing to speak the truth despite the risk that you may be canceled from mainstream media. Now, she was on a much larger platform. I was on a smaller platform here in Chicago. I know exactly why that happens. When you have media corporations, they're there to do business. And unfortunately, the reality is some of them are compromised. And the profits matter more than the truth, and the profits matter more than people. And they make decisions based on those positions. On the other hand, if you don't have the ratings where they can't produce or justify the cost, because they make a boatload of money. They make a ton of money. They don't get paid chicken feed to sit in those seats. They do make a lot of money to do the work that they do. Joy Reid is in my view, a super talented, brilliant, bright, beautiful Black woman who did a phenomenal job. And I'm sure she will land somewhere else. And I hope that she lands somewhere where she does her own podcast, and so that we could follow her there. Well, she will have the freedom to say and continue to tell the truth. And I'm sure that she could get sponsors and people will support. And all of us who appreciate and respect her work will support that work. She wasn't the only person. There was Alex Wagner, and I'm told that there are two other people that are coming in that are going to be replacing them. There's a black woman that's going to be coming in replacing Joy Reid, and I'm not sure of what their names are or who they are, but I'm told that they are people who will tell the truth. They're not people who are supporters of whatever this is that we have, the megalomaniac of Donald Trump and um, Elon Muskie, and of course, Jason Volt. And of course, there are protests and there are demonstrations on different levels and varying different levels around the country that are starting to rise up against what they see happening to the destruction and dismantling of our democratic norms. And these are not people who are Democrats or liberals. You find that there is a rejection of this this neoliberalism of taking away people's personhoods and their rights and their very livelihoods that unfortunately a very large segment of our country voted for. And there are people who have serious concerns about that, people who have serious remorse. I'm not sure that a lot of the people who are demonstrating are people who actually voted that way. They may be people who may be conservative, or maybe people who are Republicans who did not vote that way and are now demonstrating and protesting to really show their rejection of what they see happening, and the fact that Donald Trump has turned over our democracy and turned over um, the managing or the leading of our federal government to Elon Muskie, somebody who was an apartheid supporter and who is grifting and certainly trying to shield themselves from being investigated by dismantling parts of our government. That is happening, and we don't know to the extent of what kind of damage that is going to cause or what the price of that is going to be. We see in the Department of Justice where there are mounting lawsuits. There are now 73 lawsuits against Donald Trump and his executive orders. There were 300 lawsuits against him when he was president in 2016, doing this, virtually the same thing, except for there were some people in place who could push back and could say to him that, Mr. President, this is not something that we can do. It's not legal, and you will have problems. Those people don't exist in his cabinet. Those people are not there now. So the people who are going to have to do the resistance are going to have to be our federal judges at the trial court level, and certainly we see things that are happening at the appellate court level and the Supreme Court. The president has been pushed back on. So we have, which is why our founders set things up the way that they did set things up, so that they can evolve and so that we cannot have the kinds of tyranny that we are seeing trying to be exacted on the country right now between these three characters. So whatever it is that they are finding joy in doing this because of their own lack of fulfillment in life, that they have to inflict this kinds of chaos on the rest of the country. I believe that the honeymoon period for that is going to quickly wane, and that people are going to say, wait a minute, this is a pale or a step too far. Now, look, there are some people who are just like them. They just want to blow the entire system up. I have some ignorant people who, in particular, two of them, that like to come on my page, on my social media outlets, and clearly demonstrate just how ignorant they really are by posting comments without the benefit of any reading or research of what the actual truth or facts are. It is very clear that they do this, and they are strictly partisan people. I am a Democrat, but I will criticize and I will reject people who are Democrats that are not doing what is in the best interest of the public at any time. Our job in the media, our job on these platforms, we have a responsibility to seek the truth and the facts and disseminate that information to the public, irrespective of what our political leanings or affiliations are. I am a Democrat. I am going to remain a Democrat. I am going to leave this earth as a Democrat. I am going to challenge Democrats to be better, to do better jobs, to make sure that they are working in the best interest of the public, of the people, not in the best interest of politicians. What is publicly expedient, not what is politically expedient. That is what I am going to do. And I'm going to give you the facts, and the facts as they are, not the facts as I see them. That's what they call alternative facts. Facts are simply that. It is the truth, and they cannot be refuted. Again, a fact is not as I see it. A fact is as it is. It is an irrefutable truth, regardless of whether you are a Democrat, Republican, whatever label that you like to distract or fly under or associate yourself with, whatever that is. We have to deal with the truth. It doesn't matter to whether you like the person who is in the position or not. We have to deal with the truth. That is the only way that we, as members of the public, are going to be able to hold people accountable, and that we're going to make sure that we are advocating on what is right, what is righteous, and what is advantageous for the public at large. So that's what our responsibilities are. There are mediums that are compromised because they're, in their mind, the first responsibility or the first thing of priority to them is profit, making money. I believe that you can do both. You can be principled and you can also make a profit. I wouldn't want to make a profit by being unprincipled or by misleading the public, in particular, if I'm in the media and I have a responsibility to provide the public with the truth. There are mediums, small, medium, large, that are compromised, and they will go for the check versus checking for the truth. I'm not one of those persons. I don't make my living in the media, thankfully. I don't make money from being in the media. I never have. Even when I was on the air, I worked for 10 years doing a 3-hour show that was supposed to be one day a week that ended up being close to 7 days a week because I was a co-host on somebody else's program on Sundays. So for a long time, I was doing 7 days a week and I didn't get a salary for it. And I'm not complaining because from the outset, it was said that they didn't have money in the budget to pay me. Fine. You don't have money in the budget to pay me. We worked out. I get to control the content of my program and that I get to use the platform to do something good with. That became what the agreement was. So that was the compensation. However, As time went on, they were getting pressured by others, and ultimately that relationship ended. However, we were able to do some good in the time that we were there, because we were there for more than a decade. So we were able to use that platform to do some good. Unfortunately, we also found that the platform is a little compromised. Not to say that it is not an important place, but that's what it is. So here I am, here on intellectualradio.com, thanks to Earl Winfrey, and here on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and what did I forget? iHeartRadio. So for whatever period of time, but I can tell and I can report to you the facts and the truth. And then you can take that information, you can go and fact check it yourself. You can take that information and you can go and hopefully use it to advocate for equity and justice for our communities. That's primarily what my focus is. That's primarily what my responsibility is to give you the truth. And when we err or make a mistake or misstate something, it's also my responsibility to come back and to correct it. But our first primary job, to come on here to do the 2 hours that I do, and then in between we may do some special programs. There is a lot of research, and there's a lot of reading, and there's a lot of studying that we have to do to make sure that we are prepared to deal with the issues of importance to our communities. You know what my focus is that to strengthen the Black community, so that we can strengthen our voice, so that we can strengthen the equity for our communities between the two bookends of education and economics and all those things in between. That is precisely what my goal is. That's what my aim is to use this platform, is to get that information out, to get the truth out, and to hopefully to be able to galvanize us, that we will continue to build our own independent block of Democratic voters in a large enough mass that we will be able to put pressure on people who are now currently in political offices to do more and to do better by our communities in the areas where we have been underserved for decades. And the way that we can do that is to making sure that we have our own union of massed voters of a block that we can put pressure on every one of them, all the way from our local to our state to our federal representatives. That's where real power is. So that's what the goal is with me. All right. So, Joy Reid just did her last program. We'll have to figure out or find out or wait to see where she is going to land, if she's going to. I'm hoping that, and I believe that she is, maybe being picked up somewhere else, but I'm certainly hopeful that she will do her own podcast, that she will launch it rather quickly, so that we will know where she is. And let me tell you, if some people like Shannon Sharp with some of the nonsense that I see on that podcast can do that, certainly Joy Reid can find a space that she will be able to contribute and continue doing the great work that she did at MSNBC. All right, we got the boycott coming up on February the 28th. They are asking that we don't shop for 24 hours. They're asking that we don't shop for 24 hours. Please pass that along. Don't go out the day before and stock up buying a whole bunch of stuff. Just let's do what we did when we came out of slavery and what we did when we were growing up in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. We were interdependent on each other. We didn't have flour. We went next door, or we went to a neighbor's house, to a Big Mama's house, or Miss Irene, or and I'm giving names in my community where our parents would send us over to get a cup of flour or a cup of sugar, and vice versa. So we depended upon each other. Let's do that again. Let's do that again. I'm hoping that we will have an extended version of boycotting, to where it is we will either choose a company like Target. Like, I'm boycotting the NFL. I have not watched an NFL game since 2016 and will not. I said that as long as they have stripped Colin Kaepernick of his desire to play football because they don't like his politics, basically saying to him, regardless of what they pay him, that you speak when we say that you can speak. And because they could not control that, they said basically, and to all of us, they said it, not just to Colin Kaepernick. Most of us think that it's just Colin Kaepernick. It's not just Colin Kaepernick. They said it to all of us. We are the 32 wealthy white men who own these sports teams. And we will show you that we have the last word. That's what they did. That's what they basically said to all of us. And yet we still buy their tickets and go to their games. And I know people say, well, there's a lot of people that get contracts and all that. Well, progress requires a little sacrifice. It requires. And when you sacrifice on a multi-level, on a mass level, then they can't target a few. If all of the black players in the NFL decided to boycott, to not play, to resist, and not show up, it will go far beyond the NFL. Far beyond the NFL. It will send a resounding message around the world of the impact that it will draw for change. If we just had that kind of social consciousness, to understand the level of power that we can have to be ready. In order to have that power, it's not enough to just plug in. You've got to plug in so that you can be ready. You got to infuse yourself and fill yourself with information. And we have to build our teams of support so that whatever plans that we have, we can initiate those plans and put those plans to work. That is the power of resistance. We are not going to make people who happen to be people who are filled with hate and hating a people just because they think they're powerful and just because they don't like what they look like. I can't change a person's heart. What we can change is how someone behaves. But we have to do that as a collective, and we have to be willing to sacrifice because it's bigger than the moment and bigger than just us. So if all of the NFL players had decided that they were not going to suit up and that they were not going to play, they were not going to go and suit up and play. If the black players decided that they were not going to suit up, the decisions that the 32 NFL owners made by saying to Colin Kaepernick, maybe they didn't say it out loud, but they said it by deciding that they were not going to offer him the opportunity to play out his career, even though they made some kind of settlement, whatever the settlement is. But just the principle of the idea that you strip away what somebody wanted to do, then you took far more than just money. Goes far beyond that. It's about a person's dignity, and certainly in sports, you only have a certain shelf life. You get old very quickly, even though you're not old in sports. So I guess he's about 38 years old now. So I decided in 2016, since they said to Colin Kaepernick and to the African-American community pretty much that we're going to decide on and let you know that we have the ultimate power to decide on whether we're going to let you suit up and play on our fields. That's essentially what they said. So since they decided to blackball Colin Kaepernick, I decided that that is not the direction that I believe that the NFL is showing goodwill and good faith, or certainly not showing an example for the rest of us and the rest of the country. So I haven't watched an NFL game since 2016. My point is that we see people who are resisting what is happening in this administration, or whatever you want to call this, between these three characters. You're seeing people all around the country, large, small, medium, whatever, people are starting to resist because this is not what is normal. And we should not adjust to abnormality as normal. We should not. And we should not allow for them to bait us into being against each other ignorantly. What is happening in this country is not normal. What is happening at our government is not normal. This is not the way that you bring about change. It's not normal. And don't look at this as being normal, or don't look at this as, well, this is just the way they've been doing it all the way. And it may seem like it's a little off the cuff. No, it's not a little off the cuff. It is against the very fabric of the principles for which our democratic process was founded. And when you want change, when you disagree with something, you get a clipboard and you get support and you advocate through the process that is established to make those changes. That is the way that we do this. We're going to come back a little bit later on, and we're going to continue this conversation. And I'm going to welcome your phone calls that you will be able to call in, but we're going to shift a little bit right now to an an important but a little lighter subject, and we're going to be talking about our furry family members. Those of you who are animal lovers, like me. If you have dogs, cats, whatever your four-legged creatures are, we are going to be talking with Dr. Kelly Fishman, who specializes in helping animals recover from traumatic injuries and surgeries, excel in canine sports and competitions, and maintain optimal mobility and a comfort during every stage of their lives. I had to put my German Shepherd down back in October 21st of last year because his hips were just not functional, and he just could not move around. And it was just it would have been a little selfish of me to just force him to suffer and to be alive. So just for my own selfishness. So it's very hard to do. But there are some treatments. And in fact, I'm going to talk with Dr. Fishman about the one product that I started using because one of my former co-hosts, his wife, is in, I guess you would call it animal medication. And there is this product called Librela. So I want to ask the doctor about that. I'm going to bring her on right now to ask her to join me. Thank you very much. Dr. Fishman, thank you very much for joining the program.
Thank you for having me, Mark. And I'm so sorry about your dog. I'm sorry to, it's sad when they're older and they slow down. And certainly there are new medications like Librela and lots of supplements and lots of things that we can offer them. But man, is it sad to lose them? So.
Yes, it is. It's one of those very difficult things that you go through, but it really is the price that we all have to endure because we're animal lovers and pet lovers. And so I adopted him. He was 3 years old when I adopted him. And of course, we know that German Shepherds don't have a very long life. And he was one of those large, long breed German Shepherd. So I had 7 great years with him.
Yeah, it's actually quite a long life for a German Shepherd. 7 plus 3. I'm slow at math sometimes, but yeah, old age. You got him pretty old. That's great. You must take good care of him.
Yeah, well, when I got him, he was almost 3 years old. So he was actually 10 years old when we had to, to separate ourselves from him. And so I guess in dog years, it's around 61 or 63 years of human life. But he just was a great dog. So I enjoyed him. So my wife is not an animal person. So when we got married, he was a part of the package. And so the agreement is that I couldn't get any more animals. So here we are. All right. So give us a little background about what it is that you specialize in and how you can provide some information to help people have healthier longevity with their animals.
Yeah, so I'm in an area of veterinary medicine that's pretty new. It's physical rehabilitation is the technical word for it. But basically, I'm a physical therapist plus a veterinarian. I treat dogs with mobility issues. So your shepherd that was slowing down, if that was hip dysplasia and arthritis, he's losing muscle, he's painful, I would come over to your home and I would do a session, and that would involve things like massage and acupuncture, cold laser, and then lots of exercises to get him strong, because we know just with us, like with us, dogs lose muscle, and it's one of those things where like no one really knows, but muscle loss is happening to senior dogs. It's happening to dogs with arthritis, and as soon as you lose that muscle in those back legs, they just slow down. And so that's what I do. I offer those types of dogs, and also dogs with other types of injuries, just for had knee surgery, help them recover. And then also I help dog athletes as well, just perform their best. So basically a dog body shop.
So
That's
you
the
have
muscle,
something
the
where
muscle bones.
yeah, you have something you call swimming and paddle boarding. How does that work?
Yes. So that's a great exercise to build endurance. So 5 minutes of a dog swim is a great cardiovascular builder for dogs. And you don't have to have a big pool or a lake. If you have a small enough dog, you could actually swim in your bathtub, put a little life vest on them, and build their cardiovascular endurance like that. And it's a great exercise. And paddleboarding, that's something that builds their core muscles. And yeah, so when I look at dogs, I'm like, how do I get them fit? And I can get them fit through building muscle, and I can get them fit through building cardiovascular endurance. So we have lots of thousands of different exercises to give to people to do with their dogs.
Well, I was a swimmer, and
Oh,
for many years, ever since I was actually in the world for all the way through college, and of course, we use every muscle of your body. It's one of the few exercises where you use every one of your body muscles. So, but within animals, they use their hind legs mostly. Isn't that would that be fair to
yeah.
say?
Well, it does. Swimming, how good swimmers they are depends on their breed. So certain dogs like Labradors were meant to get into water and be really powerful, fast swimmers. They actually use their front legs and their back legs. And then other dogs that weren't really bred and designed to be great swimmers, like a poodle or for example, a greyhound, those dogs mostly use their front legs. So it's a bit breed dependent, but yeah, it's a great exercise. And it's cool that we even think of exercise in dogs. That's interesting.
Yeah, I couldn't get my dog's name was Shiloh. I could not get him into a pool of water. Now he'd love to take baths, but when we would go out by the beach, I could not get him to get into the water. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe if I had carried him in or something like that, but I just couldn't get him to
Yeah.
get near the water. He
Yeah.
was, deathly afraid of getting in the water, and maybe that would have helped him. In so in his case, what would your recommendations have been to help him?
So there would have been a few recommendations I would have had. So first off, from a nutrition point of view, he's older and he doesn't have, he's a he's older, and then he also has an issue with his joints. So both those things together are causing muscle loss. So the first thing I would say would be put him on a supplement that actually builds muscle. And that's a bit tough in dogs because we don't have a portion of the dog food store that's dedicated to protein powder. So there's one ingredient that I like. It's called fortitropin, and it's in a supplement called Myos Pet. And it actually not only builds muscle like a protein powder would do, but it actually stops muscle loss. So that's number one thing that I would say. Get them on something that supports muscle and stops that loss. So Myos Pet, I love for that. The other thing is getting him on a good pain medication. So you mentioned the Librela. So that's a great medication for healthy dogs, and we can't have them painful. And if we can manage their pain, good pain medication is great. There's also non-pharmaceutical pain meds, heat, ice, massage, acupuncture, laser. We have so many things that we could do, some free. Heat and ice are free at your home, and you could do those. And massage is something you could learn on YouTube, and is a great thing to do for your dog. And then, so treating the pain, doing the supplements to build muscle, then I would say you need to keep them moving. So I would have shown you exercises to stretch out his hips. So for example, if you're a taller person and you would shepherd, they could actually go up onto your arm and the dog can stretch out on your arm. And that could be a great hip stretch. They could do things like dog squats, which would build muscle in the back legs. They could do things like dog side steps, which builds gluteal strength. And then what happens is, and you're an athlete, so you know, but like you need muscle and the targeted strength exercises to build that muscle to really support the joints. So you can't just do a walk. You can't just walk your dog. You need to really do targeted strength exercises, like just like you would if you had to prepare yourself for like swimming. So that's what I would say. I mean, that's where I would start.
Well, it's very interesting in this conversation because, we've been animal lovers all of our lives, but I've never heard anyone talk about healing in this way, and certainly extending the life of animals in terms of exercise. They always tell us, you need to let a dog get out and run and that sort of thing, but never have I ever had conversations with anybody who has talked about the kinds of things that you're talking about. So how long has this been something that you've been concentrating on?
So I have been doing this for about 10 years. But again, I think part of it is a lot of general practice vets, the veterinarians that do your vaccines and you see, for the wellness exams with your dog, like they don't necessarily have this information because it is newer information to share. And having a physical rehab veterinarian like myself is not necessarily accessible everywhere just because there's not that many of us. So most people don't know about it, and that's right. And that's why I love to come on your show and share information with you and just get the word out that we have so much to offer these dogs.
Well, I certainly think that we need to have more than one conversation about this. Because, I do have people that, the animal world, right? The animal culture is, I kind of call it, somewhat of a, I don't know if I want to call it a cult, but it's somewhat of a culture of people.
Yeah.
Either you love animals or you don't.
That's right.
It's kind of like not an in between. So, and it's not really something that you can explain. But we do have these conversations, and I talk about this all the time. And then because I am in media, and Shiloh was a part of my media life, so people always ask me about that. But I would like to come back and have like a really round table with this discussion, because again, I've been an animal lover all of my life, and I've never even thought about it in the context of the way that you're talking about it.
Yeah, I know. It's like I said, it's so important, and it's such a great, you have a voice to do it. And I think if that's something that you're able to do, my gosh, like that's great, because it needs to be, like you said, people need to hear it.
Yeah. So what do you recommend? So are there different recommendations for larger breeds and smaller breeds? How do you determine what would actually work for dogs? Because, you have smaller dogs and then you have larger dogs. Like Shiloh was a very long breed German Shepherd, right?
Yes.
And I noticed that he started to lose his mobility right around his 7th year, that he was not able to spring up there.
Yeah, that's when he became a senior. So he was starting to slow down a little bit, probably because of that age-related muscle loss. Yeah. So, it's hard because, every dog's a bit different, but I sometimes look at breeds. So Frenchies and Bulldogs are kind of more popular dogs these days, and they're come with a whole host of problems. So sometimes I'll have someone come on or meet someone and they're like, gosh, I have this Frenchie and she's 2 years old, and I've heard they could have back issues, or I have, a Bulldog and they just can't go very far because they just, they have arthritis in their knees. What can I do? And I said, listen, start early, start now. Don't wait until they're a senior and you're having issues getting around, decreasing mobility, being a senior dog. Don't wait, start now. And I have people get on fitness programs when their dogs are young and healthy. Those can be things like doing a dog plank, dog squats, like I talked about earlier, and push-ups, doing stretches with your dogs, like dog yoga, and just keeping them moving, because they have to keep moving. And like I said, it's great if you have access to a pool, or, like for them to swim in, or paddle boarding. But even if you don't, if you're in an apartment, like you can do some of the stuff. And I'm going to try to put up some of the exercises on my Instagram if anyone wants to see them. They're more than welcome to do that. But there are free, sources of exercises out there that people can learn, and you don't need a lot of equipment. You don't need a lot of space. You just need, it actually is funny. Like, the dog wants to do it, like it's
Right.
us. We don't want to, like, we get home from work and we're tired and just want to go veg on the couch, but the dog is happy to engage and, wants to hang out with us. And, yeah, but really it's about starting now and not forgetting muscle. There's supplements available. There's really great stuff out there. The MyoSpet, like I mentioned, keeping them moving, keeping them thin, and keeping them healthy.
What are the top 3 nutrition tips that you recommend for pet parents and their dogs to enhance health and longevity?
So the number one that I really recommend is just trying to get away from ultra processed foods. And what that means in a dog is kibble, and actually even canned food. So kibble and canned food, what it is to heat up the proteins. They make it they ultra process it to, like, heat up the protein and make the kibble and make the canned food. And in that process, while it's perfectly nutritious, it sometimes is considered ultra processed. And so all that means is take a little bit of your kibble away and feed fresh foods. And fresh foods could be adding broccoli and green beans, whatever you have in the house that is fresh, that we can feed them. Sticking away from things that could be toxic, like grapes are one of them. But if it's generally, vegetables are pretty well tolerated, and dogs love them. And that's a great thing, just to kind of make your dog's food a bit more nutritious. And yeah, so I think that's an easy one to do. And I also love probiotics too, believe it or not, for dogs.
And those are?
Probiotics, they're like, they are bacteria that you give that can help with the immune system. It helps regulate upset stomachs. It can actually be very calming. And you can easily find dog probiotics without a prescription. They just help to, make the dog's digestive tract function optimally, and easy to put on their foods, and dogs tolerate them really well. So probiotics are another great add.
What's your opinion about, because I know when Shiloh would have he would have diarrhea.
Yeah.
And I would give him rice and pumpkin.
Yeah.
Which he loved. He loved even, and it would regulate his stomachs. So do you recommend that?
Well, I recommend the pumpkin part. So the rice, it can go either way with dogs. So, and I tend to like chicken and rice when they have a stomach upset the other way. So if they're vomiting, I like, sometimes doing chicken and rice. But if they have the problems with the diarrhea, problems with their number 2s, it's all about pumpkin and, that sort of thing. So pumpkin and even Metamucil, as long as the Metamucil doesn't have anything in it that's called xylitol, which you could look up what that is. It's toxic. But Metamucil and pumpkin is a great way. Adding those probiotics in there too is what I would do. So that's what it is. It's probiotics and pumpkin. my cure for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now you talk about the relationship between the canine and the human, that it can extend both lives.
Yeah.
Where does your research, these findings come from?
So part of it is actually mostly on the human side. And, there's evidence that's been around for a while about how dogs are beneficial for allergy. They help our, make us less allergenic. So if we have less allergies if we grow up with the dog. But actually they found that seniors, citizens, and people with dementia, so older folks with dementia, if they have a dog and they have a responsibility having the dog, they actually have a more youthful brain and have less of less of the effects of dementia. So amazing from that point of view. And then they also showed that if you're recovering from an injury, you do better if you have someone around you. And that person, it could be a sibling or a family member, but it actually could also be a dog or a cat. So if you're recovering from an injury, if you have a pet with you, you will recover quicker and have a better recovery. So yeah, lots of evidence, mostly on the people side. And then on the dog side, one of the best things you could do to keep your dog living longer is actually to keep them thin. We have some evidence showing that if you keep a dog lean, and that's not starving your dog at all, it's not what I'm talking about, but keeping them lean, they will actually live up to 2 years longer. And every time I tell people this, I said, it's one of the things that you come to the veterinarian and you want to save money. I will tell you just to feed a little bit less and save on some of those dog food bills.
Yeah. Because there were times that Shiloh, well, I've never had a problem with his weight just because of his body structure. He was very long, and he always hovered between 85 and 90 pounds. And at 85 pounds, he did look a little too lean.
Right.
And so the vet said that, we need to kind of pick him up a little bit. But in his latter years, he did pick up, he was around 110 pounds. But he still didn't look like he was overweight or anything like that because he was such a long breed dog. Let me ask you this. What are some of the mistakes that pet owners make in terms of, their animals' mobility and health?
So my biggest thing that I see is not realizing that when a dog is limping, that they're in pain. So also knowing that dogs they want to, first of all, make us happy. They're great reminders of keeping and staying in the present because they are always, in the present, meaning that if they have a bone, they're happy. If they're with us, they're happy. And they're going to actually work through. They have a high drive, so they're going to work through a lot of pain and lameness. And even if they're painful, they're still going to want to go on walks. They're still going to want to play ball with you. They're still going to want to do all those normal interactions. But if they are limping, if they are slowing down on walks, having trouble getting up and downstairs or jumping in and out of your car, those are signs of a problem. Some people attribute that just to old age, but age doesn't explain it all. There's probably something going on, and you should take those concerns to your veterinarian and make them or have them, do a really good exam and figure out what's going on. And knowledge is power, because once you know what's happening, you can help. So yeah, just knowing that that's an issue.
Now, of course, we're all guilty of having our animals jump in and out of a car, especially jumping down. And I was told that you should never allow for your dog to, jump down on their front legs, because over time it's going to be damaging. Is that
Yes.
consistent or true?
100% true. And how it works, and not really how it works, but what I tell people, a good rule of thumb is to know how high they could jump down off of. And that height is, if you stand your dog up and you take a tape measure and you put it on the floor at their paw, and then you measure up to their little doggy elbow in the front leg, and get that height, whether that's 6 inches, if it's a French bulldog, or your dog, maybe it would have been Shiloh, it may have been 11 inches or 10 inches. That's the height that you don't want to go over in terms of jumping. So a Chihuahua, shouldn't be jumping down from anything higher than its elbow height, which maybe is 5 inches, but Shiloh could do 5 inches, no problem, but you wouldn't want to do anything like 13 inches with him. just because it's really hard on their joints and their front legs. It's hard on their spine. And you're just asking for injury if you keep doing that over time.
So I guess it would be recommended that most people would have some type of stairs or ramp when your animal is getting in and out of your vehicles, because that's the area where we tend to have our animals jumping up. And I would imagine jumping up is not as more strenuous than jumping down. Would that be fair to say?
That's fair to say. Yes, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So what are some of the things that we should be doing that we aren't doing, that we don't know about? Because most of us think that we're experts because we've had dogs for a long time. But the more I talk to you, the more I find out that I don't know.
No, I think the biggest thing is, well, we talked about the weight. Most people don't know how much their dog should weigh, and talking to your veterinarian about that is pretty important. And again, not realizing that dogs are losing muscle and that they're going to have pain, and that there are a lot of great pain medications and kind of all the stuff we already discussed. Honestly, I don't really have any other, being a veterinarian who mostly focuses on, I'm the dog body shop person. That's why I think a lot of the physical stuff, but I think mostly just realizing that, you can do massage with them. You can make them feel good with a lot of different tools and exercises and things like that.
Mm-hmm. As a rule, it is largely said that dogs that are full breed or pure breed dogs live shorter lives than mixed breed.
Yes, sometimes. So sometimes it's related also to the size of the dog. So, for example, like a purebred large breed dog versus a mixed breed, maybe of the same size. So they each weigh 40 pounds. Maybe one is a shepherd and like Shiloh, or one is a mixed breed of pit bull and who knows what. Generally, the one that's the mixed breed is going to have less of an incidence of certain genetic issues. Like, we're realizing that some cancers in dogs are genetic. There's some orthopedic issues like dog ACL tears that may be genetic, and arthritis that may be genetic as well. So certainly while our purebred dogs are beautiful, and we've bred them to have different attributes, we didn't necessarily breed them to have the best bodies, because we weren't really thinking about that. We were thinking about how handsome they look with, their particular characteristics, like a gorgeous long-haired shepherd, and how sweet they are versus, maybe that came with a certain gene for cancer that doesn't come out until later in life. So that's certainly true that our, purebred dogs live longer lives. And then, our big dogs live a lot shorter lives, unfortunately, than our small dogs. So our Chihuahuas live to 18, 19 years old. And, our shepherds live a lot less.
I read in some of your information, you suggested that it is a benefit to eat together with your pet.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's, if you can share some of your healthy foods and get them away from some of those processed foods like kibble, that's a great thing. And as long as you don't, so feeding them some of our healthier stuff, if we're eating healthier stuff, is a great thing to do. And then if you wanted to, you could also take some of those table scraps and use them to do your dog squats and your dog push-ups and keep them fit.
Yeah. My mother was she was great with animals. We used to bring stray dogs and animals home that needed a lot of attention. My mother had all kinds of remedies that you wouldn't believe that she would apply, that within a couple of months, those dogs looked like we got them from, a pet store. And one of the things that she used to give her last dog that she had was a smaller breed German Shepherd. She fed her garlic, with her
Oh,
food.
interesting.
She
Yeah.
fed her garlic with her food. The
Mhm.
dog lived to be 16 years old.
Yeah.
16 years old, had no hip issues or joint issues at all. She just got
Mhm.
old
Yeah.
and passed away. In fact, the vets were asking what she was actually feeding her, and what she said was that she fed her garlic in her meal.
Yeah, they probably had a momentary heart attack because in large doses it's toxic, but certainly in small doses of garlic is anti-inflammatory. So I'd love to hear your mom's other remedies. That's great. Yeah, so garlic certainly in small doses is anti-inflammatory. It's just when it's fed in higher doses, certain it could be a little bit toxic. But that's great. That's really interesting. Thanks for sharing that. That's cool.
Yeah, no, it was not in large doses.
Yeah.
She would shred a little bit up and put it. She said put it in his in her food. One of
Mhm.
the other things that she would do. This is just for their coat, and
Mhm.
this is probably going to shock you, but she would. We There was a couple of times we had dogs that had mange all over them that we brought
Yeah.
home. My mother would mix sulfur 8
Okay.
and old burnt car motor oil
Oh my
and
goodness.
shampoo the dog. I kid you not, shampoo the dog and put
Yeah.
this sulfur 8 with motor oil all over them. And within 6 to 8 weeks, you would think
Mhm.
that we bought this dog from a pet store.
That's great. She should have bottled that up and marketed sold
I thought
it.
I thought that
You'd
that
be a
would probably
billionaire.
be somewhat what a shocker to you. All right, listen, we're coming to the end of our interview. I will certainly want to thank you, Doctor. How can our audience get more information and follow you?
Yeah. Absolutely. So, if you're interested in seeing some of those exercises that I talked about, you're welcome to follow me on Instagram. The name of my clinic is Strut. So, I always think of it as a happy dog struts. So, strutanimal.com or at strutanimal on Instagram. That supplement I was talking about, made from fortitropin or the fertilized egg yolks that builds muscle, that's at myospet.com. And yeah, and just, if anyone has any questions out there, I'm always readily available. Please email me. So always happy to talk to everybody.
All right, we certainly appreciate you stopping by, and I look
Thank you
forward
so
to
much,
talking to you
Mark.
again. All right,
Thank you,
thank you
Mark.
so much. All right,
Bye.
Dr. Kelly Fishman, folks, make sure you go to our website at strutanimal.com, get more information. Thank you so much. All right, listen, we're going to turn to politics now. Joining me for our conversation, we're going to be talking with Joni Bradley-Scott, who is running for mayor of the Village of Flossmoor. I teased this up and I told you that we've certainly been doing a lot of work out in Flossmoor over the last year. Flossmoor is a great community that is about 20 minutes south of the city of Chicago. And it is, there are, I guess it's 100 years old, 101 years old. Flossmoor is about 63% black, 27% white. And there have been some things that have happened out in Flossmoor that I think that has raised some concerns within the community. And Joni Bradley-Scott has decided to run for mayor of the village. She is a trustee there. She's a mom and a wife, and she is going to be joining us momentarily. Is Joni Bradley-Scott there with us? Joni, are you with us?
I am here.
Okay, we can't see you.
You can't see me. Okay.
Yeah, it says that your screen is locked.
Okay. Maybe
Yeah.
I need a little assistance here. It says that my camera is, I do see the locked. Okay.
Yeah.
I think this is such a cool platform, so I have to figure this out.
Okay.
Do you have any suggestions? Because it is not giving me anything.
Maybe log out and try to log back in.
Okay.
All right, log out and try to log back in, and we'll see if that works. All right, we're going to be talking with Joni Bradley-Scott in just a minute. So, folks, please hang in. This is a very important conversation. I want to ask you all to reach out to your social networks, text people and ask them to join into the program. They can go to Mark Wallace, The People's Show on YouTube, or they can go to Mark Wallace, The People's Show on Facebook to hear this conversation. I hope that she is able to get the screen up and you're able to see that radiant smile that she has. Joni Bradley-Scott again. The first time that I had conversation with Joni Bradley-Scott was when I was actually called by Craig Wimberly, because at the time, this issue where the administration, the mayor, and the village manager had decided within 6 months of hiring Chief Jarrell Jones that they wanted to terminate him. And so that's how I got involved. And then Joni Bradley-Scott was the first person that I spoke with within the administration. Here she is. And so I'm going to bring her on with us. There she is. All right. Fantastic. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, sir?
Good, good, good. I was actually just saying to the audience that the first time that you and I spoke about the situation that was going on, that we were all learning about what was happening with Chief Jarrell Jones, that everybody was confused about why this was happening because there was no concrete information. But the first time that I talked to you about it, running for mayor was not something that you were even interested in doing at the time. In fact, I guess it's fair to say that you were very reluctant at that point, at that juncture. But the more things started to develop, obviously there was a change in your thoughts about running for mayor. Tell us a little bit about that.
I think that you summed it up pretty well. I had no interest in running for mayor. I knew that it was a commitment and that I have a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old children at home who are going through the prime of their experience. And so I wanted to make sure that I was hands-on and available for everything that they needed me to do. And as the situation continued to evolve here in Flossmoor, it just got me more infuriated that that was happening and that the board was not listening and not willing to assist. The community was outraged, and so it just led me to know that someone had to run for mayor, and that person ended up being me. I knew that I had the skill set to get the job done, and I knew that I could bring about the change that I want to see as a resident. So it, took some prayer, some counsel, and some belief with the community, because I did talk with our community members to make sure that I had the support to be successful.
And in this process, there's an obvious thing about the makeup of the demographics of Flossmoor has changed over the past, say, 30 years or so. But when I was speaking, and I thought, he made a very valid point about it's really a matter of what's right and what's wrong, and what we have been experiencing and seeing is that the Jarrell Jones situation and the Madeline Miller situation are emblematic of a greater problem that has probably been systemic for a longer period of time that most people hadn't paid attention to. And you tell the story that, like, when you moved to Flossmoor, that you thought, okay, this is the utopia, right?
Right. You can use the word arrived, because that was my exact thought process. Is I attended high school in a neighboring community. We would come to the Home of Flossmoor area, and it was a beautiful community. The facilities were maybe 1,000 times better than what I had in my high school. So it was just an ideal place to be. And one that I said, one day, if I'm still in the area, I would love to be here and raise my family here. And so we thought that we had arrived. No plans of getting involved whatsoever. When my son was in kindergarten, I traveled for work at the time, and it was a joy to be able to go to the school and pitch in. It made him very excitable that his mom was there. And what I learned in volunteering as a room parent is that that was the standard for the community. The parents came to the school and pitched in for the holiday events. When the teacher needed extra hands, we were there to decorate the door for her classroom. And so by pitching in those small ways, it made the light bulb, if you will, go off to show that that's what the community would do in order to maintain the esteem and greatness that people assume that happens here in Flossmoor. And so through that time, I got involved with the PTO as a building chair, is what we call it. And there are about 5 to 7 parents on that board. And from there, someone said, Joni, you would be good on the village board, because I have a real estate background. They thought that it would be good for me to be a representative as the village clerk. So I ran for village clerk in 2017, was appointed to trustee in 2019, and then ran for my trustee seat again in 2021.
So, Flossmoor is a great community. In fact, I did some investing in Flossmoor starting back in 2003. So I've done 4 homes out in Flossmoor, and most people around the city of Chicago and around the surrounding areas, they look at Flossmoor as like, a great community, and could easily see how you could miss some things. So we know about all of the good things about Flossmoor. What are some of the problematic areas that you have become aware of that really needs to be addressed to make Flossmoor a greater community than it already is?
Sure. So the mistake that I made, as I mentioned early on, is I just thought that I was going to put a hammock between these 2 large trees we had in the backyard, and that was going to be it. I was going to enjoy my time here. But the mistake that I made, which I think happens to a lot of people, is that it is a safe community. It is a community where neighbors are on the watch and paying attention. They are invested in making sure their lawns are taken care of and their homes are beautiful. And so sometimes by seeing that, you disengage. You show up, and sometimes you don't get involved, and it just becomes a home that you live in, but that you don't get involved in. And so I think that is one of the things that has happened in Flossmoor, where people come here, but they're not committed. And by that non-committal, it allows things to go under the radar. And the things that I'm talking about that go under the radar is things that happen with the police-involved shooting back in 2021, where one of the residents was killed. It was considered a justified shooting, but how the shooting was handled was not proper. So I would say it was mishandled. And then you have the Jarrell Jones firing in 2024. And so those things have been high-profile incidents that have happened in Flossmoor, but because the residents have not been engaged for a period of time, sometimes they miss those hot-button topics that should really get us, moving and speaking forward on what's happening and some of the injustices that have occurred.
Well, in the time that we have been involved with the community there in Flossmoor over the last year, I think that even though we came in looking at what was going on with the Jarrell Jones situation, it also made us all aware of that this is not just a one-off situation. There's some systemic problems because decisions are being made that impact a certain part of the community, but the community's voice is not being respected when the community obviously has some concerns or certainly some objections to it. We saw that that was not even considered in the Jarrell Jones. And then with the detention basin, we looked at how that process went through. And it just brought a level of awareness to the community that even though we are here in this community and we like our community, but our voices are largely not heard here.
Correct. Yes. And that has become a problem that has been very much a focal point. And I think that by seeing how things have been done, I pray that it is a result of coming out and vocalizing how they feel at the polls on April 1st, because we didn't have to be here. I think that we have a lot of individuals in the community that are hands-on and engaged. The reception that they got from the mayor has not been great. And so there were a lot of opportunities to pivot and change things, but because there hasn't been the transparency that needs to happen or the accountability, things just are going off the rails. And it is perpetual now. We had a forum a couple of days ago, and the mayor outright lied in the forum against the police department. And it's just things like that where when you have someone in authority making claims and providing information, people trust it.
True.
And so we have to challenge the information that we're getting and demonstrate that we don't accept it. It's not acceptable.
Well, one of the things that I recognize, and I'm sure that others recognize, and we can't ignore, even though things need to be done properly and things need to be done right, but there is also people address things from their lens of how they see things. And Flossmoor being 63% Black, 27% white, and the administration is 100% white. They only see it through their lens. They cannot see it through the lens of the African American community. Therefore, there is not the diversity in government that reflects the voice of the community. So you can't possibly have the kinds of equitable representation when you only have one side of the community represented in government.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely.
So, and I think that the other part of the community needs to see that. And I've done some canvassing in the community, and I've expressed that to people in the community. I also expressed it to, there was one white person that I expressed it to in the community, but I certainly expressed it to the African American people in the community because they could have view things the way you were viewing things when you first came there. And you can easily fall into that. You can easily fall into that when you have moved into a community where all the homes are beautiful, the community is safe, and things are going pretty good until you've had some things that are like warning signs, like the Madeline Miller, the handling of that, the Jarrell Jones, the handling of Jarrell Jones, and then the detention basin. So it brings an awareness that, wait a minute, these are things that have happened that we have expressed some concerns about, that we think should have been done differently, and express that, and they continue to make decisions despite an overwhelming concern from the community.
Right. And it just continuously happens under this administration. And it's very confusing, right, as a board member and as a resident, because you hear people saying what the answer is to the question, but the mayor refuses to bend on it. I was talking to a resident earlier today, and she is a white resident, and she indicated how the mayor could have made several pivotal changes in how she handled things that would have resulted in the community, even though it was not decisions that we may have gone with, but that at a point she understood, and that she could understand where people were coming from, even though she did not initially agree. I think that that is growth and inclusive leadership being displayed when you're able to pivot from your own individualistic standpoints and are able to include the community which you are residing over and presiding over in an influential way. There is a high school, as I mentioned, the Homewood Flossmoor High School, where we have some excellent leaders in the community. We are making a demonstration to the children. We are making a demonstration to our neighboring community on how we handle things, and that when we're faced with a problem that we don't agree with, that we will lie, cheat, and do everything but the right thing to resolve the problem. And I think that making residents feel as if they don't have a voice in the matter, and making the trustees operate it from a standpoint of just being lame ducks, where we're not able to get the real business done because we just don't agree on the policies and procedures of how things are going.
Right, because my view is, and I've stated this to Trustee Mustafa and others, that I look at the trustees, which the community voted for and put into office to be their eyes, to be the ears, and to represent what is in the best interest of the community.
Right. Absolutely.
That is merely just a facade. It's a facade because you have 3 black trustees and you have 3 white trustees, and whatever way the village manager and the mayor wants to go is seemingly the way that the vote consistently goes. That if the 3 black trustees vote against something, that suggests that there needs to be more conversation before a final decision is made, rather than saying, okay, well, I have the 3 white votes and I'm the tiebreaker, and so this is the way that we want to go. This is the way it's going to happen. That's the way that it's happened. So it puts a level of distrust in the community that is quite obvious, and that's just not a way that that an administration should be governing.
Absolutely. Absolutely not. It is a problem because, sometimes when you come from a different walk of life, it prevents you from seeing the other person's perspective, and that's fair. However, when people are coming to you and telling you over and over again, repeatedly, where the errors are happening, this would not have been a sword I would have wanted to fall on, because a different decision could have been made when you see, like you said, the votes were being split down the racial lines. You would have come back and said, let's table this until we have better counsel. The counsel that the village has received on the matter, I think, is also a problem, because we did not go get the industry best to tell us how to handle moving from the Madeline Miller situation forward. We are working, in-house with tools that we could, I think, have the industry specialists as it pertains to when a police-involved shooting happens. What is the course of action to take? And if we worked with the police department in an appropriate way, consulted with the families in the appropriate way, there are so many areas where do we do an assessment after all of these incidents to find out how we could have handled things? And the answer is still no, we haven't. So how can you govern when you never have checks and balances on how your performance is going and how you're able to determine what it was a good decision, what was a bad decision, what was the outcome of that decision, and how to prevent it from happening again.
So what they've been representing, that there is a process and there is supposed to be a process, but the process is not does not function if the decision is not what they want it to be. Like this whole situation around Chief Jarrell Jones. Now, in the history of Flossmoor, that's 100 years old, they've never, to my understanding, or certainly to my knowledge, where they have had to replace the police chief, that they've made up a position that was made up by the administration, and the board had no voice in it. Nothing outside of a conversation, that they absolutely just made up a position and decided what that position was going to be to fit a person that they wanted to bring in. Not that anybody is opposed to the person, right? Because we're not trying to say that we object or that you object to the person, but the process by which this was done was not inclusive of what we know as a democratic process.
Right. Yes, there were things that with even that matter could have been done better. We could have followed our processes and procedures on the matter, and we could have been given what we were promised. So we decided that this position was going to be created, and we were supposed to get additional information before the actual position came into creation. So the position came, the job description came on the same day that the appointments happened. And I don't know any other boards that operate where they get their operating procedures on the day that they're going to implement the procedures. You have an opportunity to say, okay, these are good things. This goes along with what we have in place or what we need. You have checks and balances somewhere. And so we didn't have an opportunity to do that as a board, and our processes are broken. That's basically what it boils down to.
Well, help us to understand how this even came about, that this position was created for someone who did not have the qualifications to actually be a police officer or to be a chief of police. How was that, and why was that? Why did they determine that that was the way that they had to go in order to fill that position? Because it's still very confusing.
It is very confusing. And I'll step back to when former Chief Jarrell Jones was terminated. The acting chief, who was the deputy chief of police, became the acting chief of police. And he served in that position for, I think, 3 or 4 months in the prior cycle when former Chief Jones was being hired. So the village manager indicated that we needed to hire from outside to do a national search. We did the search, and the former, let me make sure I get this right. So the acting chief, because the titles have changed a few times. So the acting chief of police, the deputy chief, served as acting chief for a few months. And then former police chief Jarrell Jones was hired. And when he was terminated, the same deputy chief became acting chief again for the months until we figured out what the next chief of police would be or how we would come about this role. And so instead of going back to the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police, who were part of that recruitment process, we made up our own process and had some folks that we consulted with to determine how to get a candidate from that applicant pool from when Jarrell Jones applied in 2022, part of the police force here in Flossmoor. And so from that discussion, they determined, because he was certified in another state 13 years ago, he would have to go through a recertification process to transfer his license in Illinois, since we're a reciprocal state. And so it was the process. It took 6 months for that to happen. And in that interim period, these guardrails or new rules or new position was created to give him time to pass the testing and so forth that were needed to be certified here in Illinois. And so that process took from the formal announcement of hire went out July 1st, approximately, and then he was certified in February and appointed last week to the chief of police position. So there were quite a bit of workarounds for this creation of the position. And once the position was filled with the new chief, the created position was dissolved. So again, it was a lot of moving parts there, and why that was done, I am still trying to understand that myself. One of the questions that has been asked is, what is it with the person who served as acting chief for those 2 cycles, which total about 15 months? What happened that did not qualify him or to be chief long term? And so I don't have the answers specifically to that. And
yeah,
that's why I'm ready for mayor, because it's not a lot of transparency on what's going on.
Yeah, because it seems to say that if a person is qualified to be acting chief, you have to have somebody to be acting chief. If they are qualified to be acting chief, they're not qualified to be chief twice. Were there any recommendation from the Illinois Association of Chiefs for the deputy chief to become chief? Were there recommendations of letters of support on his behalf, or did the village manager and the mayor ever address why the deputy chief was not given the opportunity to be chief?
So the response is that the creation of the position and now the serving chief of police will assess what is missing so that he can be the acting chief, or now deputy, back to deputy chief, can be trained to become a chief of police for long term. But in terms of what is missing, I haven't been given a direct answer to that. Mm-hmm. And I think that would solve a lot of the mystery here if direct questions were answered with verifiable information. Because as far as I know, the village manager nor the mayor have been certified as police officers in the state of Illinois or elsewhere, or have training to determine what is, what are the ingredients of good police officers, or police officers that can lead a village, and the discrepancies between you can act as an acting chief, but you can't be the chief. So that doesn't quite resonate or make sense to me at all.
So the now current chief, who was in this other position that's just been appointed since they became qualified to be a police officer in Illinois. So he was trained to be a chief somewhere else?
I haven't gotten information that he has worked as chief in other places. No, not to my knowledge. I don't know that he has been chief other places. No.
And do you know how long the deputy chief has been on the job?
I can't recall the exact number of years. More than 12 years, I know. But
so he's been on the Flossmoor department. For more than a decade.
Yes.
Okay. Which is, you know, it would tell me that he has a pretty good handle on the community and certainly what the community needs. You know, that's part of for me, as a citizen, that is part of the frustration of what I have learned, and certainly what I view in Flossmoor, that there's a disconnect. I also learned something else, that the village manager has been there 21 years, which is very unusual for village managers. Most village managers' tenure is about 5 years. Any idea why she has been on that post for so long?
Yes, I think she made 20 years this past year for being in the current position. And I think that because the board has not provided any oversight and given any direction to the village manager on what the expectations are, and making sure that the village manager is reviewed, perhaps we as a board should be held accountable to that, because that's part of our responsibility to the community, is holding the village manager to certain standards.
Yeah, because it seems to me that the village manager has far more authority, and there is no oversight to the village manager, except for they serve at the pleasure of the mayor. But the board is responsible to the community. So it would seem to me that the board should have some sort of oversight to the village manager. This village manager seems to be insulated because there's nobody to check the village board manager. So, you know, they seem to run things with an iron fist almost.
You're absolutely right. And there are 3 board seats that are up for re-election, mine included. Once I'm successful as being mayor, right, my seat is up either way. But I think that it is really important that the board reevaluate how we function and have the same standards that the village manager had, as an example, for former Chief Jarrell Jones, in terms of trying to provide a performance review. It wasn't a performance review. It was, I'm trying to find a kind word for it, but it just didn't meet the standards of what you would want to provide somebody with encouragement or guidelines to improve. And so when we look at what we're looking at in the future, you want somebody who is, if they have the ability to provide evaluations for their employees and the people, their subordinates that report to them, you want them to have the same standards, because, you know, we're all connected. And so I just want people to get out to vote come April 1st, and the 3 trustee seats that are up get a new, fresh perspective of candidates in those seats, and get me elected as mayor of Flossmoor.
Well, we certainly need to do that. Joni Bradley-Scott, who is a trustee there. And for anybody who is watching, just because you don't live in Flossmoor, wherever we are, it is important that we support good people to be representative of our communities wherever we are. And I would ask for you all to join us in supporting them. 10 by 10 to Win is supporting them. Mark Wallace and the People's Show are supporting this candidacy. We need to do all that we can to make sure that we reach every single voter in Flossmoor and certainly convince them that there needs to be a change and that the administration needs to be much more reflective of the community. And certainly there needs to be some administrative changes there if that is going to take place. I mean, when we see the things like what has happened, even with the detention basin, let's speak to that a little bit, because it's still the same thing. It's the same thing with the detention basin that talk about where the detention basin is placed and the school, and what is the makeup of the school that detention basin has been placed in, the land that it is basically taking over.
Indeed. I have to give some additional insight that in certain parts of Flossmoor, we experience a considerable amount of flooding when it rains during heavy rainfalls. And so in significant rainfalls, it is to the point where homes, the water can go up to the front door of some homes and flood the interior of people's homes. So it is a pretty big deal. In 2019, there was this flooding event, and in 2020, we passed a referendum to work with our street repair and sanitary sewers. So we were going to address the flooding issues in the neighborhood that I live in, which is Heather Hill, with about 50% of that referendum money. So we had about $10 million that was part of this referendum. And the community in Heather Hill was very excited about this. So for a year or so, the engineers were coming up with the plans on where the water would go. And they came back with maybe about 7 sites around town. A few of the sites that were identified ended up not being favorable to the water reclamation district in terms of taking water to one area that floods to make another area flood more. And so it was very peculiar to residents who had students at the school, which was one of the sites identified, because they didn't support the detention. At the time, it was a retention basin going there. So the difference between a detention and retention basin is that the retention basin would have held water through most of the time. And so residents didn't like that aspect. And at a point, it became a detention basin where it was dry bottom outside of the time that it rained. Maybe 9 hours later, it was supposed to be dry. The reason that's significant is because initially the detention basin, one of the sites being Heather Hill, it was going to be behind the school. It was going to be a runoff, maybe about 6 feet deep, where the students would be able to still utilize a lot of the green space around the school. Instead, what happened is the engineers came back and said, we have another site. And me being on the board and being a resident of Heather Hill, I'm telling the residents, don't worry, the detention basin is not going over here in Heather Hill. Another site has been identified. And the residents were happy about that. It was going on a golf course. The story changed when the engineers came back a third time and said, well, the business didn't want the detention basin there. So now Heather Hill became the #1 site again. So when I get this information, I'm telling the village manager and the mayor, we need to have a town hall with Heather Hill so that we can tell them what's going on, tell them that this is where the detention basin is going to be, and get their buy-in. That meeting never happened. It took 2 years for a meeting to take place. Number one, the location changed a few times, but number two, the name of the project was called the Flossmoor Road Viaduct Project. And so me being a working parent with young kids, I know how communication works, where sometimes you see something, sometimes you don't. And if you're being intentional and transparent, you want to communicate that information as timely and as often as possible. Because the information was coming out as the Flossmoor Road Viaduct Project, the Heather Hill residents were not paying any attention to it. So I raised all of those red flags with the village manager and the mayor. The mayor would take the names of the people who were questionable about the basin and have one-on-one conversations with them. And when I was talking with the residents, they would say, well, the mayor said this and the mayor said that, but everybody had a variation of the story that wasn't the same. And so I'm telling the two individuals, the village manager and the mayor, let's get everybody together because everybody can hear the same story at the same time. And if they have questions, we can provide them on the spot answers, get the engineers here so that we can alleviate any concerns that everybody has. The meeting never happened. We get another report from the engineer to say that not only is Heather Hill the ideal area, we need more land than originally thought. So now we're going to take out the tennis courts and take the detention basin deeper than what was originally determined. Now, let me set the stage for the school. The school is a school of kindergartners through fifth graders. And the side where the detention basin is the biggest attraction is right next to a playground and this 22-foot hole in the ground. And so the residents were very upset. The meeting that eventually happened through me forcing the hand was in January of 2024. But the meeting communication had the wrong date. So that's the third infraction that we made in terms of getting the information to the community. Number one, we wouldn't keep them engaged from the beginning. Number two, we would not call the project what it ended up being named, which was a phase 2 Heather Hill project. And number three, once we were communicating with the residents, we gave them bad information. So in the community, this particular community, it is predominantly Black students at Heather Hill Elementary School. And again, it's working class families where they're not, if they know something is going on and they need to be there, they're going to be all hands on deck. But if you never tell them, then they don't know. And so it's pretty, deceptive when you operate like that as a town. And when you have board members, not only myself, but Trustee Rosalind Mustafa also lives in Heather Hill. So you have two alarms telling the village board exactly what we're hearing from the residents, but it fell on deaf ears. And so,
well, I had the opportunity to walk the detention where the detention basin is located, and the idea of putting something like that as close proximity to the school that you could actually walk out of the school in 10 feet be where the detention basin is. Now, I know it was said that they were going to put some type of protective fencing up there.
yes.
But was part of that land, was part of the land in the back part of the school, not where the playground is, but where the back part of the school is, was part of that land where they used for activities for the children?
Yes, absolutely. The children would play during various times of year in that area. So it eliminated the green space and it created an unsafe environment in that the detention basin, which was going to be maybe 6 feet approximately deep, the runoff, it is about 22 feet. And so when you're on one side of the school, you can't just look down and see the other side. You really have to be, right up on the fence to see something. So if a young child, which children have been in the detention basin, when they are in there, you can't see them from the street. So it is really a situation that we are going to have to continue to monitor and not think that it is, the school's problem. Because that's the fourth problem with this is because the village did not work well with the school and community, there were some lapses in leadership and how to make it safe. So when the detention basin was being constructed, there were children going in there with heavy equipment, and there were gates and unsafe, hazardous conditions where the children were falling, or not falling, but running down and riding their bikes into the basin. Now that there's a fence there, I don't know that anyone has gotten into the basin. So, but we can't tell that because one is monitoring it. There are no cameras, which is the fifth matter.
Yeah. Certainly this is the last question for now, but this is a conversation that's going to require a lot more a conversation. Was there another location that would have been a mutually agreed upon location by more of the residents that would not have infringed on, green space and impacted businesses and residents to place the detention basin to have the to protect the homes?
That's a great question. And I don't know that is one that we honestly have the answer to, because the residents were not allowed to have a say in what was going on here. So having town halls, focus groups, best practices, that never happened. There was one town hall. And so when you have a project that cost $6.5 million, you want to have a sounding board of, every step of the way to make sure that it's safe, to make sure that we're considering all of the engineering that needs to happen, all of the safety measures to reduce hazardous instances. There were a few water main breaks where residents were without water for over 10 hours. There were so many things that could have been avoided had the community been brought to the table, so that we could have made sure we dotted our I's, crossed our T's, we were OSHA compliant. Everything that should have happened happened. The school was left on an island to come up with some notification to tell parents of what to do, and it just was disjointed. And as a leader, you never want to make your residents feel like you don't care, that you are not listening, that they don't have a voice for something going on in their own neighborhood. The other part of that was that in a meeting, the mayor brought businesses in to show residents how we really needed this to happen, the detention basin to happen. And so in the 2019 flood incident, the downtown businesses were affected. And so I believe the mayor thought, well, since that happened to the businesses and we're trying to solve a problem for the residents and businesses, let's bring you all together and talk about it in a board meeting. Well, it didn't go well. So what the meeting sounded like was residents on the one side and the businesses were pit against the residents, and they're arguing their points. We're one community. You need a level head to hear those conversations in a different environment where it's not hostile. What ended up happening is most of those businesses ended up leaving because the residents they felt weren't supporting them. And so you never want that to happen, where you're pitting your businesses and residents against one another.
Yeah, this is where real leadership comes in to play, to where you have an open process. And I think that this is evidence of there not being an open process and just sort of having some, whatever they wanted to call it, kind of a process, but then a decision that was kind of seeming like this was the executive decision, and this was the decision, and we'll go through a little bit of the process just so that we can, quote unquote, make sure that we met whatever the protocol was.
Right.
the decision seems like it had already been made, and they put it in a place that just happens to be where there is a predominant of African Americans served, which speaks to, again, I point to the lack of diversity at the administrative level, that, or the executive level, which is two people, the mayor and the village board manager.
I think in this instance, it wasn't a racial issue. It was a lack of leadership issue,
sure,
and a lack of ability to resolve conflict. So I think that perhaps, having a few more skills and skill sets. And the other part, the sixth infraction, was that the mayor's husband is on the school board where the school is located. So there was a conflict of interest in my book.
Mm-hmm.
And it just created more problems than it should have. I believe he should have recused himself from the process. Yeah. Because on their board, it was pretty contentious as well. But yeah.
Well, certainly some things that need to be addressed, and I think that the only way that you're going to address them is that you have to change leadership there and have somebody who is in that position that has the sensitivity to making sure that there is much more involvement in an open process. And the person that we believe is Joni Bradley-Scott to do that has stepped up to the plate to do that. And so we want to make sure that happens on April the 1st, that she is elected. But we also have to make sure that those other seats, because you have to have the support on the board also, which are voices of people who want to make sure that there's a much more inclusive process in the village, and make the village an even greater place to live, and then to address the issues. One of the things that you say, you talked about, is even though we're in the village of Flossmoor, we are connected to the region, and so you have to have a much more wider vision about having leadership and looking into those relationships to build and to strengthen the economic viability of the community connected to the region.
Absolutely. Flossmoor is a small town of less than 10,000 people, and we have many small towns connected. When you cross the street, sometimes you don't know, if you're not familiar with the area, that you're in a different neighborhood altogether. So it definitely requires that we work together regionally to get the economic development that we need, to get our property taxes streamlined or reduced, and all of the things that are important to every single one of us on this call. It requires collaboration. And I, once elected as mayor, am going to work with our other community leaders, work with our other elected officials and state representatives to get the outcomes that we need here in the Southland, for sure.
All right, tell us how people can support you and how they can get more information.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Yes, I can be found online at friendsforjoni.org, friendsforjoni.org. That's the campaign site where you can see all of the things going on and follow the campaign. But you can also check out the social media hashtags on Instagram and Facebook. Friends for Joni Bradley-Scott, JoniBradley-Scott, Joni, Friends for Joni Bradley-Scott. And we are canvassing this Saturday at Shops on Sterling in Flossmoor at 11 a.m. So 11 to 2. So if everyone, or you're available for some portion of that time period, we would love to have you canvassing the area. And canvassing is it's a friendly activity, but essentially door knocking and introducing ourselves to the residents of Flossmoor to let them know that Joni Bradley-Scott is running for mayor.
All right, fantastic, Joni Bradley-Scott. Yes, and let me tell you all, folks, in the last few seconds that we have, I had a great time canvassing and talking to the residents there. Please go out and join them this Saturday. Support them, canvass, go out, meet the residents, help them get the word out for Joni Bradley-Scott so that we can make sure that we get her to the office of mayor. Joni Bradley-Scott, thank you so much. We'll talk to you very soon.
Okay, sounds good. And thank you so much for allowing me to come on today. And thank you, 10 by 10 and the People Show for allowing me to talk with you today.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll be talking more. All right. Joni Bradley-Scott running for mayor, folks. That's going to do it for this edition of the People Show. Make sure that you join us for the meeting on this coming Thursday for 10 by 10 to win. Text 10x10 to the number 855-909-1385. And we will see you next week right back here on the People Show on intellectualradio.com.